I came back from Italy with a valid passport, and Homeland Security refused to let me out of the country, held me for an hour. And a supervisor came over to the person behind the computer, the Homeland Security official, and said, he's on a watch, tell him to go. Stuff like that. Well, I mean, the great thing about, I was a war correspondent for 20 years, so I don't really scare too easily.
But how do you know children? Are you afraid of them?
I'm more afraid of what they're doing to them than I am afraid of what they're going to do to me. And you know, it was interesting when we sat through this trial challenging the NDAA, and my good friend Cornel West came and sat with me. He just came to court to be with me for the day. And one of the plaintiffs was Alexa O'Brien from US Day of Rage. And when they did the Stafford dump, WikiLeaks exposed 5,000 emails of this private security firm, Stafford. You saw the back and forth how they were trying to link US Day of Rage to Al-Qaeda. Because what they do is they create these draconian, in essence, criminalize dissent and terrorism, and then they link the groups to terror. It's the same thing with the anti-communism. And Cornell leaned over, I mean, it was quite chilling to hear these things read out in court. And Cornell leaned over and he said, oh my God, oh my God. I mean, and I said, yeah, they'll take people like Alexa first, but, and then they'll get us. I mean, we have a certain protection because we have a public presence that makes us a little harder to deal with. But should there be any kind of significant instability, but my wife's Canadian, so.
Yeah.
If Harper will let me.
I had an inspiring father too, passed away, was a Canadian judge, saw the Nazis get going in Germany, his family took him out, they eventually came to Canada, he became a believer in the rule of law, and international institutions like nations and so on, to keep our world safe from fascism and so on. So I'm quite impressed by the way that you think and what you express. I find myself agreeing a lot with the conclusions that you reach, and myself, and business, children, and what I hear a lot in my community is, well, we have things to be concerned about, but the response is generally technology is this. I mean the technology is this. Science will advance so quickly that all of these things we're concerned about will be no longer concerns. There's a whole sort of almost millennial spiritualism, which the mantra of the thought, finding others, being from echoes of the earth, or the transformation, sort of new age of love and peace. Between those and those that are concerned with creating and protesting individual voices, what I'm looking for is a constructive to responsibly engage. I'm not a crazy on left or right. I'm a person who does believe in the rule of law, who does believe in civil and human rights, and wants to do it.
Well, that's the problem. The elites, I mean, I was talking to Ralph Nader a while ago, and he said, it used to be that on the political spectrum, it was the conservatives who always called for the rule of law. Now it's the dissidents who call for the rule of law, because the radicals are crazy, run the place. I mean, you as a country have sat by and watched, walk out on Kyoto, as if we have any time left. And the two responses to climate change are equally self-delusional. One, it doesn't exist, or two, we can adapt. It is utterly imperative that we begin to accept a certain degree of discomfort, especially if we have kids, because we have deeply betrayed our children. And that's why, as Wendell Berry, who's a writer I admire very much, he's 77. I think, well, for me, most of the moral voices in the States, Wendell Berry, Cornel West, Bill McKibben, they've all come to the same conclusion that it's civil disobedience. Wendell occupied the governor's office in Kentucky with other mountaintop removal activists, and before he went in, he said, frankly, going to jail is more time than I care to donate to the U.S. government. But nobody likes to go to jail. What's interesting about oftentimes those mass actions is how deeply moving they are, if you want to use the word spiritual, but they are. We did and this was even before Occupy, we did an event with 133 veterans in front of the White House protesting the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. And it was winter, it's on YouTube. And so the snow's coming down, and you have Vietnam vets, you have Iraq vets, Afghan vets, some in their dress uniforms, some been quite badly wounded. Watermelon Slim, this blues musician who's a Vietnam vet, gets up and plays taps with his harmonica, and then these vets folded the flag that had been over the coffin of a young man who had been killed the week before in Afghanistan, his family had given us. And then it went completely silent, and somebody started beating very slowly a drum, and 133 of us, all of whom had been in war, lined up to go to the White House fence to get arrested. And I can tell you, most everyone was crying, because we know what war is. That's my church. Those are the people I worship with. Did it stop the wars? Nobody even noticed, really. The Washington Post, New York Times never wrote a story about it. And yet, being in the midst of that was deeply empowering. And somebody made a really nice video. There's two. There's one just on my talk, but don't watch that one. Watch the other one. If you type in my name into YouTube, the one that begins with a picture of Daniel Ellsberg, and it intersperses my talk with interviews with the vets, and you just can't, it's really powerful. There's this one boy that just came, 10th Mountain Division, wounded by an IED, then shot. He's there in his dress uniform. So I think that, Hannah Arendt always talks about totalitarianism as resting on the capacity to keep a citizenry atomized and isolated, and that these acts of resistance, which appear futile, which are not even noticed often by established press, are deeply, deeply empowering, because they create a sense of solidarity, a sense of common understanding, and I think that it's always outside our comfort zone. It's not, and yet at the same time, it's there's something almost jubilant about it. There's a kind of freedom in it.
You finally break free, I think, out of fear.
Is participation in the electoral process just another way to perpetuate the system that has developed over the last 50 or 75 years, where, as you describe the situation, as where it's going, where it's leading, where it's going?
I'm a little reluctant to talk about the Canadian system because I don't, it's not as far gone, I think, as the American system. In the United States, I think voting is a waste of time. I'll vote, but I'm not going to vote for Obama and just suit it a little problem. I don't waste my emotional or intellectual energy on the elections. I told that sort of story about Obama's health care plan and Romney's because Obamacare is Romneycare. And that's the perfect window into the kind of faux debate that is taking place. And all of my energy goes into building movements and participating in movements. I didn't vote for Obama in 2008. I not only voted for Nader, but I wrote all of his major policy speeches for him. Nader, no American has been fighting corporate power longer or with more integrity than Ralph Nader. And if you go back and look at the Lewis Powell memo, Lewis Powell became a Supreme Court Justice and was the attorney for the Chamber of Commerce. It's public, it's on the internet. He talks about how we have to destroy Ralph Nader. He is the greatest threat. I mean, he wrote 24 pieces of legislation that was pushed through Congress that still had a legitimate liberal wing in the Democratic Party. The Mine and Safety Act, the Clean Water Act, OSHA, that all came from Nader. And there's a great documentary called An Unreasonable Man about him. And in it, you have all these former Nader raiders who have now gone on as lawyers to make money and are complaining that Nader's ruined his legacy. Well, of course, what it is they walked out on the values that Nader refused to abandon. And they've been dining out on what they did 30 years ago ever since. And they asked Nader about it, and he goes, what are they going to do? Take seatbelts out of cars? You know, Ralph Nader's one of the most important, he's a very close friend of mine, I mean, one of the most important figures in the country. And my understanding of corporate power, because I was overseas for 20 years, really came through Ralph. You know, he spent a lot of time with me and, you know, gave me all the right books to read, including Sheldon Boland's great book, Democracy Incorporated. So, yeah, I mean, I saw through this then. When I was in the primaries, Dennis Kucinich, who I supported in the primaries, told me, you know, you got to read Obama's 2-year voting record in the Senate. It's one corporate giveaway after another. You got to look at what these people do. Forget what they say. The public relations industry, which is one of the most evil professions on the planet, is quite skillful at making us confuse how we are made to feel with knowledge. You know, that Walter Lippmann term, manufacturing consent. They've got it down to a science. And you got to build walls. I mean, you know, they've just intruded now into that space of which should be reserved, making it almost impossible to think that capacity for solitude is quite frightening. I mean, this course I taught at the University of Toronto was a 400-level course, a seminar with graduate students, mostly and seniors. They were reading Hannah Arendt, Origins of Totalitarianism, and I found they had trouble with it. They had trouble with the concepts. And I kept saying, you can't go home and read this with something in your ears. You know, if you really want, you need 3-4 hours of silence, you know, in order to think. And we have built a system, and they've done it quite consciously, that's designed to essentially keep us from thinking. And I think, you know, it's a very frustrating debate in the United States. You know, it becomes about Obama's personal narrative. Obama's personal narrative, Romney's personal narrative, Bush's, but it's irrelevant. It has nothing to do with anything. When you understand where the actual centers of power lie. But you're never going to get that off of a screen or over the airwaves. You're going to get that from political philosophers like Wolin, or if you know his work, he's without question our greatest living political philosopher, taught at Berkeley and then later at Princeton. His great 1960 book, Politics and Vision, is one of the seminal texts of political philosophy, certainly ever written by an American. So yeah, I'll vote for either the Green Party or for Rocky Anderson as a kind of to express my dissatisfaction with the corporate state, but I don't put any energy